I'm Sophia Aragon. I'm a registered nurse and the executive director of the Washington Center for Nursing. First of all, I want to thank all of the nurses out there for all that you do for our communities. So 2020 is the year of the nurse and the midwife. We wanted to do something for the special year's Nurses Week. And so we've teamed up with Stefan Torres, who's also a registered nurse and a public health figure and leading nurse advocate. So Stefan, you and I met last summer at the National Academy of Medicine's Town Hall at the University of Washington, where you are recognized as an innovator in nursing in technology. Can you talk a little bit more about that as well as your background in nursing?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been a nurse for about 7 years. Worked in a lot of different capacities. I have my board certification in emergency nursing. I love what I do. I started making videos, meshing videography with the nursing and nursing education. You know, it kind of just took off on its own. I was fortunate enough to have, a good following and a good reception on social media. And that allowed me to reach people to raise awareness about, different health conditions for the public, but also concerns for healthcare professionals. Any sort of, disconnect between specialty, stuff like that, things that people didn't understand. I would try to be that kind of connecting force. So yeah, that's what I did, and I've gotten a pretty good audience that I really appreciate.
Clearly, with what you do as a nurse innovator in education, you do a lot of juggling and have a lot of personal experience with self-care. So we really appreciate you joining us to share your personal experience with self-care and how that benefits your career.
There's a lot to talk about.
In the midst of all the changes in our world, why is self-care so important?
Yeah, I'm not even telling people to incorporate self-care into their life anymore, okay? For our mental, physical, and spiritual well-being, I'm telling people at all costs they need to avoid self-neglect.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, given the circumstances we're in today, if I was a nurse that just worked 36 hours and I turned this on and heard someone say, you need to be getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep, I'd say, what is this guy, delusional? Right? What fairy tale is he living in, okay? Don't need this, click, right? They'd be right to. But this is not a HIPAA module that you're going to want to skip through or click to the end of. These are real-world actions that we need to take.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure, yeah. There's become a new norm, and it's definitely a dangerous one. Nurses are working 36, 24, 18-hour shifts, and that's just not acceptable. And believe me, I've been there. I've done it. The mentality is, I got to help out my team. Well, I can do this, or I have to. What everyone has to remember is, think back to orientation. There was not a single time that I went through orientation, and I went through a lot of them, that the question wasn't asked, whose safety is most important? And it always catches a few people. A lot of people say the patient, right? And then the nurse educator, the nurse executive, the nurse fill in the blank will say, wrong. It's yours. You never put the patient's safety before your own. And they're right, and always have been, okay? No matter how compassionate and self-sacrificing you are, it's not the prudent thing to do, okay? And despite the drastic changes that have happened in our world, the rule still applies. And fundamentally, it always will. Because if it didn't apply, then you would be compromising your own safety, your patient's safety, your family's safety, everyone's safety. And that is opposite of being a prudent nurse.
So how should we approach self-care differently today than we have before?
Yeah, with a totally different attitude, okay? If this was last year, I would expect nurses to watch and say, those are good ideas. I might want to incorporate that in my life, right? This year, the attitude needs to be, I will not jeopardize my own safety by not incorporating these things. Caring for yourself has all the key components, same as they were before. The only difference now is that it's not an option to not do them. If you're a nurse, I don't need to be asking how many steps you got in, okay? There's no more weight loss challenge at work. We're not checking our cholesterol every quarter. Okay, times have changed and we're in survival mode now. And what we have to look at is what survival mode incorporates.
And you mentioned these long shifts, sometimes 2 or 3 in a row. How do you survive that?
The simple answer is that you don't. You won't, okay? You will break at some point, okay? Nurses are a resilient and strong tribe, and there's a lot of them out there that'll say, I can do this, or I have to. But truthfully, you can't, responsibly, and you don't have to. We've all heard the studies about, 12-hour days, more dangerous than 8-hour days. And nurses, I think, as a whole have agreed that 12-hour shifts are fine. Sometimes we'll pull 16, but that was back then. Now times are changed, right? You've got nurses doing 16s every day and sometimes pulling all-nighters. So while we're a tenacious and resilient tribe, we have the responsibility to understand what our responsible limits are. So I'm not going to tell you to go and get 7 to 8 hours of sleep. You know this. We've been hearing it our whole lives, okay? What I'm telling you is to use the strength and intelligence that you have to say, no, I'm clocking out now to go and get it. Because maybe you want to keep helping. Maybe the extra money will cover the cost of some things. But it'll also cost you your energy, your well-being, your sanity, your happiness. And the more you sacrifice that responsible balance between work and rest, the less you can afford those things.
So we put our foot down, we put our head down, and we got some sleep. We go back to work, and it's still crazy. And in this climate, it's more high risk and high stress than ever. So how do we mitigate that?
First off, I would say, if you've been a nurse for more than a year and you're still not leaving everything at the door when you get to work, you know better. Stop it. Secondly, I would say no matter what kind of nurse you are, from a phone triage nurse to a CVICU nurse, home health nurse to a flight nurse, morale is everything. It doesn't matter who you work with. The physicians, techs, CNAs, MAs, researchers, you're on a team. And even a home health nurse, okay? You and your patient, that's your team. You can have the most brilliant minds, technically skilled, best looking team out there. If your morale ain't up, I'm off the team. So at my last gig, every day I got to work, I knew I had one job waiting for me. It was the first thing I did. It was to scope out whoever was down in the dumps, whoever was being the negative Nancy, and take care of that real quick. Because we're nurses, right? We know people sometimes better than they know themselves, right? And it only takes about 5 seconds to crack a joke, pay a compliment, or just acknowledge someone by saying hi. If you're able to figure out how to boost morale on a unit, you are one of the biggest assets on that unit. Not only are you boosting spirits of the people on the unit, but you're being of service, and that serves you. The last and probably most important thing is acceptance. Recognizing the things that are out of your control, accepting it, and then letting it go. Because the world will happen to you, and there are things that you cannot control. And those things that you cannot control, you can't let it control you. Acknowledge what's happened or what's happening. Feel the emotion. Understand you have every right to feel that emotion. Take the time if you need to, but don't let it consume you. Karen ate the last red vine, okay? It hurts, right? You're entitled to those emotions, right? The jealousy, the envy. Take the time if you need to. But even if Karen wanted to, she can't give you back that red vine, right? And even if she could, I don't think you'd want it, right? So let it go. But the point is, sometimes it is those small things. And sometimes it's the bigger ones. 4 nurses called in, so you're short-staffed on the unit, and it's going to be a rough day. Your patient shows you a picture of their grandchild, it's their first grandchild, and then the doc shows you the CT of your patient with aggressive cancer, right? The kid you didn't save, Whatever it is, the same rules apply, okay? You may need more time for some of them, okay? You may need to go cry in the bathroom for the big ones. Hopefully not the red vine. If you do, I don't know, we're talking about therapy next time, right? But the point is that, at some point, no matter what happens, you got to get past it. You got to let it go.
But this is particularly hard for people who might experience personal trauma, in which case people might get stuck and they feel like it's impossible to let go. Have you been in that situation, and what do you do?
Absolutely, yeah. Trauma can come in many forms. Some shockingly sudden, some drawn out in anguish. You will struggle, it will hurt. And it might feel like you can't get by it, right? But you have to believe that you can. You're entitled to spend as much time as you need to on these things. But ultimately, when you're ready to, you can. You just may need some help.
Mm-hmm. And you're a big advocate for therapy.
100%. I won't go without a therapist.
But there are some people who are worried about the stigma associated with that. Yeah. What do you say?
Who cares, okay? I mean, no one has to know. It's confidential, right? You wouldn't know if I didn't tell you, and I didn't post it all over my Instagram stories, right? You could look at it like, put yourself in a new grad's shoes, right? You've got to do trach care on a patient. You've never done trach care. And you're looking down at the neck like, what if I drop something in there, right? It's scary, it's uncomfortable. Talk to your charge nurse. She's gonna say, thank you so much for asking me. Of course I'll help. Patient will give you the, thumbs up, right? If you've ever been a float nurse, if you've ever been a travel nurse, if you've ever been a resource nurse, you get real good at asking for help. Where's the bedpan? How do these beds work? Where's the bathroom? Give me some help here. Asking for help is nothing to be ashamed of. It shows that you do have intelligence and you are perceptive. Recognizing that you have an issue, that you can get through it on your own. You can't just leave it at the door, and it needs to be processed. At this point, you got to get outside of yourself and talk to someone else. And, not your family, not your colleagues. They're probably the ones you need therapy for.
So what advice do you have for someone who's never had a therapist? How would they go about finding one that works for them?
First off, anytime we talk about something like this, if anyone's in a mental crisis, thinking of harming themselves or anyone else, you need to seek help. Tell someone, call a crisis hotline, get to an emergency department. You need to seek immediate help. So that being said, if you're a nurse that's working and you want to get some sort of counseling or therapy, okay? What I would do, mosey on into your HR office. If they got relocated to the Philippines, go ahead and give a call. Try that way, right? But if they are local, you can even call in. Not give your name and say, hey, do you have any counseling options for me? They might have something called an employee assistance program. I didn't know what it was until about 4 or 5 months ago. Essentially, a couple counseling sessions for free. And I was in orientation, and the gal had said, we offer an employee assistance program. You get 5 free counseling sessions at no cost to you. I raised my hand and said, I'm gonna need that number right away, right? And she went and got it, brought it back to me, gave it to me in front of all the orientees, right? No shame in my game, and I needed it. I think the people that think they don't need professional help going through this crazy, challenging world are the ones that need professional help the most, because they're obviously missing something. But if your employer doesn't offer the employee assistance program and you have medical benefits, there's usually almost always mental health coverage. There's amazing resources online, psychologytoday.com, wide list of providers. Okay, you can filter them out to your specific needs, anxiety, stuff like that. It's almost like a dating app, right? You pick the mile radius, male or female, 5'8", whatever it is. It's fantastic.
That's something I hear a lot about what people say is they tried it once and it's not for them. What would you say to them?
I would say, that therapist isn't for you. Or maybe they are for you and you just got a little uncomfortable. Just like in any profession, you've got great providers and then you've got duds. Some people think the duds are great providers, some people think the great providers are duds. If you were to go into the emergency department, you wouldn't say that physician was a jerk. Emergency visits aren't for me. No, it's ludicrous. Why would you do that, right? It's needed, just like mental health help is. And so you treat it the same way. Because, counselors, therapists, they're so important. They give you tools in order to cope with grief, deal with trauma, PTSD, anger, stuff like that. And that's imperative, especially at a time like this that we're living in right now.
I'd like to talk with you about nutrition and exercise, because that's something that people tend to put on the back burner and not put any priority on.
Sure, right now there's no room for me to talk about the food pyramid, carbs, good fats, bad fats, scrap all that. Nurses know how to eat. And if they don't, they know how to figure it out, okay? And you got a lot of them that are doing meal preps. They're on some sort of, VB6, 112, 98 degrees, B2K diet, whatever it is. We've been at this for a long time.
So say more about healthy eating.
I can't tell you what to eat. I can't tell you when to eat. I can't tell you where to eat. But I can tell you that you need to eat. And I'm not a nutritionist, but I can tell you what I see happen with nurses, particularly the ones that are closest to me. For whatever reason, they confide in me. I don't know. They either overeat or they undereat. And when I ask them why, it's usually because they overeat because they're depressed, bored. It's just how they eat in their home, or culturally, whatever it is. But if you do think you're overeating, you can get help, but don't feel bad. This is America. We're a fluffy bunch, right? Even in Seattle, where we're pretty health conscious, still a little fluffy, right?
And so what do you tell your friends?
Well, what I ask them usually is, are you happy with what you're eating? If they say yes, that's fine. If they say no, I tell them to look into that, explore new foods. But again, if they say yes, then I say, okay, well, you're happy with what you eat. Are you eating healthy? And if they say no, well, look into that. It's worth going online, doing some research, scheduling a telehealth appointment with a nutritionist. This is something that could, in the long run, save your life.
So what if you already eat healthy?
So if you ask yourself, am I eating healthy? And you say yes, Ask someone else, someone you know that eats healthy. And if they say yes, you might be sitting pretty. But something that really bothers me with my friends is that they don't eat. And oftentimes it's because they're working these 16-hour shifts, they don't get breaks, and they're exhausted after work. And that really bothers me because it's just really annoying. You know, it's moody, snappy, irritable, just like anyone else would be when they're too hungry, not enough food. And I don't want them to be that way, right? A lot of times they don't even realize it and they start blaming it on other things. And that's where the acronym HALT comes in.
What is that? What is HALT?
So HALT is an acronym, stands for hungry, angry, lonely, tired. You consider it if your mood's off before you react to any sort of situation. One of those four things could be the culprit. So we already addressed T, tired, in the first session we did, advocate for yourself to get sleep for the safety of yourself and for others. The angry part, if you can't fix it yourself, therapy will help with that. Loneliness, we'll get to later, but right now hungry is the one that we're focused on. And it's a little bit of a misnomer because hunger is a feeling, and half the time, my friends don't feel hungry, but when they eat, they feel better.
Now, how do you know when you're eating enough?
That's a good question. We all know you have to eat to survive, right? You also need to eat enough to not get the mood and behavior issues that come with not eating enough. Especially when we're expending as much energy as we are as nurses and healthcare professionals that are being taxed more than they have been, ever before. So this comes back to the whole advocating for yourself and saying, I need my break. End of story. And they may laugh and tell you to go back to your pod, but you got to have something somewhere, right? Some sort of sustenance, okay? You got to eat something whether you're hungry or not.
Talk about exercise.
Yeah, for exercise, let's assume that we're not isolated, okay? That's easy. Just get moving in any way you know how to, okay? For some people, that's a couple steps. For some people, that's a couple stairs. Some people, that's 20 flights of stairs.
Now, what if someone wanted to take the plunge and do more intensive exercise like weightlifting?
Yeah.
And they haven't done it before.
Definitely, it's an excellent thing to get into, but I'd caution not to get into anything that you're not comfortable with. So don't try lifting free weights if you don't understand your body mechanics. Ask a friend, get a personal trainer, but don't do something that's out of your comfort zone that you don't feel safe doing. You got to get into the habit of asking people for help in all aspects of your life, including this. If this is unexplored territory, uncharted land, and you don't know the lay of it, you're not expected to, and we were all there once.
Now, what if you're isolated and alone, and that's a huge barrier to exercise for you?
Yeah, so assuming you're isolated, right now while we still have the internet, YouTube is your friend. Okay, not only can you subscribe to my channel, you can check out all sorts, thousands of videos online that have step-by-step instructions for every single person's level of competency. But the bottom line is nutrition and exercise are not sacrifices that need to be made during a time of crisis. They're directly correlated with how you show up in life. You want to be alert, you want to have energy, you want to be strong both mentally and physically, especially in a time of crisis.
But you're at work and something traumatic happens to you, and you are hours away from either taking a break or going home, so you can't really step away and call your therapist and process it out. So what's your advice to nurses when that happens to them?
Yeah, that's extremely good point. And it depends on what kind of nurse you are, right? Some nurses deal with traumatic events seldomly. Others, it's every hour of every shift. But regardless, if it happens once in a blue moon, it still needs to be addressed. And from what I've found, it's best done with the team that was involved in it as soon as possible after whatever event takes place.
So what does that look like?
Well, early on in my nursing career, I was fortunate enough to be with a team that was full of upstream thinkers, evidence-based practice, and so one of our practices was debriefing.
And what does it mean to debrief?
Yeah, so after any event that might trigger heightened emotional stress, anything like that, or anything that can really, you could assess process improvement, get together, everyone huddles as soon as possible. The event could be anything from, say, restraining a patient that was combative to a code blue, regardless of the outcome. Everyone gets together that was involved in the event, and you go around to each person and you ask them, how did you feel about it? What did we do right? what could we improve to do better?
And so how does that help?
It gives a non-threatening environment for all the healthcare professionals that were involved to really express their feelings or emotions, anything that manifested during the event, to kind of give a release for it.
Can you give me an example of that?
Sure. So say the combative patient that I was talking about. You're in the room and there's a lot of chatter going on. Afterwards, I might be a little reluctant or apprehensive to approach everyone that I noticed that was making the noise and tell them how I felt. What the debriefing allows for, it's almost an expectation that you either say what went well, what we could do better, just express your feelings, or just say, I think everything was fine. Say, for example, it was my turn to talk. I might say, I noticed that there was a lot of people talking in there, and it not only was distracting for me, but I noticed that the patient was getting riled up, right? And then the charge nurse might say, good, that's a good observation. You know, there should be a single point person, and we should limit our interactions if we're not that person. And that'll become so normal so quickly that your team will get so comfortable with each other, and that is exactly what we want, right? In huddle, you might even talk to someone directly and say, you know, Sam, I noticed you were trying to get a line in there the entire time when we had an IJ, an IO, and an AC. There were other things that you could have been doing. And, you know, Sam might give me the head nod, and then say Becky might chime in and say, you know, that was really my fault. I told Sam to get a line before we went in and before I saw that we had all that access. And then the charge nurse might say, well, still, we all need to be assessing the situation, and we need to have good communication. Stefan, you could have said something to Sam when you saw that he wasn't getting a line and we had plenty of access. So the important thing is that everyone can improve. And this gives the opportunity to not have that thought, you know, that you have in your head that might have came up during the event, gnawing at you and being destructive. Rather have it be constructive, you know, improve the team and therefore, you know, the patient outcomes.
So do all facilities debrief?
I don't think so, but I do firmly believe that all facilities should have it in their policy that debriefing is a must after any sort of traumatic event. It only takes 3 minutes, and especially during the devastating times that we're experiencing now, it's so worth it.
So what if it's not on your unit? Would you recommend a nurse to ask permission to do it? Or is there a way you could be a leader and get it going?
Yeah, that's a good question. I did go to a facility where it wasn't done. And right after we had a code situation and we lost someone, I was expecting it to happen, and everyone just dispersed, right? And so for me, that was unusual because I was like, aren't we going to talk about this? And I approached a couple of people and I asked that same question. The response was, what do you mean? And I was like, you guys don't debrief? And they're like, no. And so, you know, to me, I thought that was weird. So I went to each person and I talked to them individually, but that's a little challenging. I'm sure it's something that you could try and get instituted at your facility if they're open to it. It takes a couple minutes and it's so worth it.
Now, what about those introverts out there that feel like they can just sort of process it by themselves? I was there, I saw everything. I'll just sort of make a list about what happened and how I felt about that. Does that get you at the same place as a debrief with the team?
No, I don't think so, because, you know, introverted or not, and you do have the option of saying everything went well, but then is that really being genuine? You know, so I think that when people are called on and asked to speak about what was going on, they've realized that that's their opportunity to improve the team working together. The team really itself can use the improvement, and you know you can contribute to that. So I think in your heart, if you know that you can, you will speak up. I don't think you get the feedback and the constructive criticism or whatever it is by just kind of keeping it inside and not discussing it with anyone else.
Well, this certainly sounds like something that every team should be thinking about as a regular routine when something really traumatic can happen. So thank you for sharing your experience with us about that. Now more than ever, we're seeing so many health professions experience burnout. So what have you seen work to combat that for nurses?
This is something that comes up a lot. It's a hot topic because retention's important. I think the first step is acknowledging it, because with all that talk, a lot of people discuss it and will say, you know, I feel burnt out, but rarely, if ever, do I hear someone say, I'm suffering from burnout. Because saying that you're burnt out, it's kind of like, maybe it's something that's gonna pass and you'll feel a little bit better the next week, you won't be so burnt out, right? But if you say I'm suffering from burnout, that's more of kind of a statement saying, there's something in my life that's a big part of my life, which is my career. It's no longer making me happy, and it could be causing troubles in my life. And that's a much, much bigger problem.
So how do you address that?
Today I would address it a lot differently than I would, you know, say several months ago. In my personal experience, what worked for me was I kind of, thought about What changed? There was a time in my life where I really loved nursing. I really loved what I did. And the job didn't really change all that much, relatively speaking. So I thought, well, maybe it was something about me that changed. And then so I started to kind of assess myself and my behaviors. And something I noticed was that when I really got into nursing, when I started, one of the things that got me the most excited was patient interaction, right? And so I remember sitting next to, my patients and having long conversations with them. People would be like, "Where's Stefan?" Right? And I'd be in the room. And so I realized that as time went on, I'd start spending more and more time in the break room, any free time I had, or at the nurse's station where, a lot of times there's gossip and negativity, which, isn't all that good for the psyche. And so I kind of decided, okay, I'm going to give this a shot. So several years into my career, I said, I'm going to go and sit with my patients. And it was unbelievable the change that happened. There were obviously days where I had no time to have any sort of break. Whenever I did get free time, I would go and I would sit with my patients. We would have conversations. They loved it. It made me happy, and that's one way to remedy it.
So what if nurses try to do what you did and they're still feeling that burnout? What can they do next?
Exactly, yes. If you do think back to what, really, really inspired you and got you into nursing, you go and give that a shot again and that doesn't help, you can kind of do what I did.
Mm-hmm. And what's that?
Well, anyone that follows me on social media has seen what I do and knows that I have a blast doing it. And that's essentially taking my passion outside of nursing and combining the two. And so for other people, they're going to have different passions, right? Whether or not it's crocheting, playing the guitar, I don't know, whatever it is that you love, try to infuse that into nursing. So say videography is kind of your thing, like it was mine. Do what I did. There's room for plenty, right? If playing the guitar is your thing, write songs for your patients, the kids, the parents, those that are passing away, the families that are experiencing these traumas. I mean, be a rock star and having such an impact, a profound impact on these really, really memorable experiences for these people. If you're into crocheting, then crochet a
baby blanket,
sure, yeah. For the unit or, for anyone on the unit or for someone's, child, but whatever it is. But try to take something, your passion outside of work, shine that light into nursing the only way that you can really shine it.
So that's a great tactic in terms of finding something outside of nursing. But what if that doesn't work? What do you suggest people do next?
Yeah, so if that doesn't work, honestly, there's 1,000 different specialties in nursing. Go shadow, try something else, try on a different pair of scrubs, see how that works.
And you said that this is your, standard go-to recommendations where things are normally challenging, but what about these times where we're in a COVID-19 crisis?
Yes. Now, a lot of these things sound unrealistic, right? Not enough time to do it. Is there any time I can sit with my patients? Absolutely not. I've got 10 of them on IV drips, on ventilators. This is crazy. Now is not the time for me to be tapping into my nursing school roots, right? You got to think about burnout a little bit differently. It's not that this job has taken its toll on me over the long period of time. It's like, I can't make it through the first 6 hours of my shift to kind of burn out. So I really think it's about meeting the basic needs that we talked about before. Advocating for yourself to clock out on time to get that sleep because it's absolutely necessary. Trying to get your breaks as much as you can. Eating appropriately, getting enough nutrition, enough sustenance, and then at some point you may want to look into getting another job, honestly, because you never know what's waiting out there for you until you go look. I feel like a lot of people feel stuck where they're at.
And what about spirituality? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, spirituality is extremely important to me, and I'm glad you asked. If someone that's watching is saying, I got no time for any of that, and I'm sure there's plenty of nurses saying that, whatever time you do have, whether or not it's 10 minutes in the break room to close your eyes, or it's 20 minutes before bed, strengthening whatever spiritual connection you have, making that inner peace uninterruptible in any way that you possibly can. It takes time. Reading, understanding, but it's so worth it because in the devastating times that we're in right now, at some point, that might be the only thing that we got.
Well, thank you for taking the time to talk about something that could be a very personal subject. Spirituality can mean many things, and encouraging people to explore that for themselves. So thank you for talking about how that is connected to preventing burnout. What is the one thing you would recommend nurses to implement in their life given what we're going through?
Okay, one thing, okay. I think given the times, everything's happening very rapidly and things are changing every day. So I've always recommended journaling. The thing I will call it now is a journal log, and that's because I kind of separate the whole idea of a journal and the idea of a log. And the journaling would be to, again, we're living in an unprecedented time where everything that's happening now is going to go down in history. And so not only to look back on, but to help release and to help yourself, self-care-wise, to notice things about yourself. And I know that documenting is the most daunting thing for nurses, but I'm going to tell you to do it again because it's so important to get this stuff down. And if you think about why we document at work, right? To keep a record, to look at trends, to reference. It's the same for this. Journal about how you felt that day, what happened, were you angry, were you happy, who were you mad at, if anyone, who made you happy, what were you thankful for, were you fearful of anything, those kind of things. And document them as if you were charting vital signs. That way you can look at it page by page and notice trends. And that's really very informative to look back on, because if you're writing down that one of your colleagues is upsetting you every day, you're going to notice that. You're going to notice that you're writing down, their name constantly every single night. You're going to find somewhere, whether or not it's inside of you, outside of you, upstairs, wherever it is, there's an answer, there's a solution to it. I think looking at it in that light is the best way to do it. Otherwise, you're just going to get sick of writing their name down and you're going to say, okay, listen, I got to do something about this, and then just, deal with whatever it is at work. But that's kind of the journal side of it. It's really about noticing those things that you can improve on, self-improvement, noticing what kind of character defects you have, resolving those to be a better person ultimately.
So talk about the log portion of documentation.
Yeah. Because of everything that's happening so quickly, there's so much misleading, misinformation, and misconduct that's happening right now. Inevitably, when lawsuits are flying around left and right, what do we do as nurses to CYA? Document, document, document. It's going to help you in the future. If something happens, if you feel like you're being pressured into doing something, or if you don't think something right happened, then that is likely to come up in the future. So if you have a log, that's going to serve you very well, not only for your own brain, but just in any sort of legal situation. So, and say you don't like writing, you could always pop open your cell phone, use the voice recorder, captain's log, start date. I've got no idea because I've been in the hospital for 84 hours, right? But the most important thing, however you want to do it, is as long as you're releasing emotions and recording encounters, those two things will be invaluable for your future.
Thank you, Stefan.
My pleasure.
I just want to say thank you to our nursing colleagues out there, and we hope that you find this series of self-care tips beneficial to you, willing to explore others that would help support your work and your life. I would also love to give a heartfelt thank you to Nurse Stefan Torres and sharing with us his talent and his stories to help inspire others to find self-care that works for them. So thank you again. To see more information about the Center for Nursing, you could visit our website at www.wcnursing.org. We are also on social media on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And if you'd like to support additional programs like these, please consider contributing to the Washington Center for Nursing. We are a 501c3 nonprofit corporation. Thank you so much for your work, for caring for your patients, contributing to our communities, and please stay safe.